Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
You know what they say, learning is the light, and not learning is the darkness. If you learn, all roads will be open to you. And of course, I'll do everything in my power to help you, Wendy told her daughter. While that rote memorization of rules from the school program. Molly was raised by her mother and grandmother. The girl never knew her father. She was obedient, always helped around the house. Wendy worked hard to make sure her girl had everything she needed. She worked hard, and on those rare weekends that she had, she tried to spend all her time with her daughter. But when she was in 8th grade, she overheard a conversation between her mother and grandmother. "I still can't believe he's such a scoundrel." Wendy spoke in a trembling voice about her mother. "I believed him. Mom, that's what I'm gonna do now." "Well, it's too late to cry," Lisa answered. "Everything is in God's hands. If it happened, it means that someone needs it. I'm barely pulling my own weight." He wouldn't calm down, and that girl couldn't figure out what they were talking about. Mama's always off-key, cutting off phrases. Suddenly, Wendy said, "You're gonna take care of Molly for a few days. I might have to go to the hospital." "You're crazy, don't even think about it," Lisa said indignantly. "A day? You should have thought about it beforehand. And now don't take the sin out of it. Molly was raised and this baby will be raised." When Molly heard that, he dropped the briefcase from his hands. So unexpected were her mother's words to her. Wendy came to the noise. "What's going on? How long have you been home?" The woman asked. "Mommy, are you having a baby?" "Skip the question." "The mother's question?" the girl asked. "No. What makes you think that?" The woman began to justify herself. "I just have to go away for a while for work, and you will stay with Grandma." "Don't lie to me," Mom asked her daughter. "I heard everything. Grandma just said loudly, 'We raised one and we'll raise the other.'" The woman was at a loss. She looked at her daughter and did not know what to say. Lisa came to the rescue. "Molly, you're not a little girl anymore. And of course, you've got it right. It just so happens that you're going to have a brother or sister soon." "Mom?" "No," Wendy wanted Mom to shut up. "Molly, it's not true. Grandma just got it all wrong." Suddenly the girl smiled broadly, walked over to her mother and hugged her tightly. "Mommy, this is my dream. I've been dreaming of a little sister. You won't believe it, but every time before I went to bed, I prayed about it. And now God has heard me. Mommy, don't go to the hospital. I'll help you with everything. Me and Grandma." Hearing these words, Wendy cried. She hugged her daughter tightly, and Lisa breathed a sigh of relief. Resolved. "Thank you, Lord." And soon a rosy-cheeked baby girl was born, and they named her Cindy. Molly, as promised, helped her mother with everything, and while she was at school, her grandmother looked after the baby. And Wendy, in order not to lose her job, had to leave maternity leave after 3 months. Molly's father never once took an interest in his daughter. Therefore, in the birth certificate of the girl, as in the case of her mother, stood a dash. Lisa had a heart for both granddaughters. She was worried that the girls would follow in their mother's footsteps, and often hugging the girls and stroking their hair. Grandma used to say, "You are mine." Molly could not understand why grandmother said that. After all, an orphan is when you have no one. And they had a mother and a grandmother. But Lisa was just like that, right? Towards the end of school, Molly Lisa suddenly collapsed. Doctors were unable to determine the exact diagnosis, so they treated her for everything at once. But every day the woman got worse. In the recent past, a blossoming woman full of strength and energy was fading before her eyes. On the day the high school diploma was handed out, her grandmother was gone. Molly decided to get a job to help her mother. But Wendy insisted that the girl continue to study. Molly easily entered the institute. Now there was little time left for her sister, but she still helped her mother as much as she could. Cindy grew up bright, inquisitive, and very mobile child. She was always following her older sister. She was happy when she returned from school. The girl could sit for hours next to Molly and watch her studying. And in the middle of the 3rd year of the institute in their family, there was a tragedy. Cindy was then 5.5 years old. Svetlana suddenly felt bad. How do we often have indisposition? The woman did not pay much attention, deciding that this is nothing more than an ordinary cold. She did not go on sick leave either. She decided to continue working. But every day her condition only worsened, and when the ambulance brought her to the hospital with a temperature under 40, it was too late. The doctors did what they could, but the woman burned like a candle in 6 months. After burying her mom, Molly was left alone, little one in her arms, and soon the guardianship authorities visited their 2-bedroom on the outskirts of the city, which the girls inherited from their mother. Having talked to the older sister, outlining their idea of Cindy's future, they took her to the orphanage. They had one answer to all Molly's objections and arguments. You are a student, and you can't provide a decent living for your child. You don't feed yourself on your scholarship. Get a job, and you are welcome to come to us. Over the next few days, Molly broke her legs looking for work, and luck turned to her. In one rich house urgently needed a housekeeper. The owner, a pleasant woman of about 50 years old, was looking for an assistant, but with the condition that she needed references. Having learned the story of Molly, she took pity on the girl and took her on probation. If I am satisfied with your work, I will pay you well and help you get your sister back, Kelly assured her. To say that Molly was trying is to say nothing. Kelly, too, kept her promise, and when she saw Molly's first paycheck, she was speechless. She had never held that kind of money in her hands before. And after another month, Cindy was returned to her. She was over the moon, though it was hard now. In the mornings, Molly and Cindy rushed to daycare. Then she would go to work across town, and all day long she would be like a squirrel in a wheel. From work, she hurried to the institute, and in the evening again to the kindergarten for her sister, and then home together. Cindy, despite her small age, understood how tired her older sister was. At such moments, she nursed her sister like an adult and said, "Are you tired, Molly? Well, wait. I'll grow up and I'll help you too. Just don't leave me." Molly pressed Cindy to her motherly way, kissed her on the top of her head, and said with a smile, "My darling, we will surely manage with Kelly." Molly found a common ground very quickly. The woman liked her new assistant. She appreciated her honesty, integrity, and neatness, and often gave her little surprises for the little ones. "I feel a little awkward, embarrassed at times like this." "Girl, you are too kind to me, Kelly." "It's nothing," answered the hostess. "I'm glad I can make someone happy." Molly was glad that fate had brought her into contact with Kelly. The only thing she had always wondered was why such a pleasant woman was so lonely. It was awkward to ask, and Kelly was in no hurry to tell her anything about herself. Once, cleaning out of the house, she noticed an album with photos and wondered. Flipping through the pages, she studied the pictures of young Kelly. In some she was alone, in some she had her friends with her, and in only one photo Kelly was standing with a very handsome young man. They were smiling, and it was clear that the young people were very happy at that moment. She was so engrossed in the album that she didn't hear the landlady enter the room, and noticing her own thing in the hands of the housekeeper, she said, "My whole life is in it. All the memories of the past, friends, colleagues. And this man, who is he to you?" Molly cautiously inquired, pointing at the picture with a young man. "You look so happy." Kelly cautiously took a lesson from him. Silently looked at it for a long time, thinking about something of her own and smiling, as if she remembered the time when this picture was created. And then she said, "You are not mistaken. We really are incredibly happy here. And this is my fiancé. We're both in our 30s, if I'm not mistaken." My God, how in love were we with each other? Well, at least I was pretty sure we were at the time. We were making plans, discussing our wedding, and suddenly it was over. Kelly stopped talking. Doma could see that she was having a hard time with these memories, and an even harder time talking about them. The girl put her arm around the woman and patted her shoulder. The woman looked up and smiled, but her eyes were still sad. What happened to him? He's alive. Molly tried to distract her mistress from the fleeing memories. Who? Kelly wondered. Alex, of course, he's fine, and I hope so. And then, after a little silence, she still continued. The wedding was only a week away. When I found out he wasn't the only one. You did? I was surprised. Why schedule weddings if you want to be in another one? The woman looked at her with a smile and replied, "You are too young and you don't understand a lot of things yet. Trusting. And people like that often take advantage of you." Then in my 30s, I had achieved a lot. I had my own business, from which I received a decent income. I bought my own apartment, wanted to buy a house with a large plot of land, and with all this I could afford a vacation a couple of times a year. And Alexei liked that kind of life very much. It was exactly what he had dreamed of, but he couldn't achieve it himself. Understandably, Molly could hardly contain her emotions. He enjoyed vacationing with me, Kelly continued. He told me daily about our plans for the future. He could describe in detail the house we would live in, and with us, our 3 children. Yes, 3 children. He wanted me to give birth to them, and I didn't mind. He had it all figured out. As he admitted later, he wanted to put me on maternity leave for many years and take the reins of the business into his hands. The scheme was simple. He would gradually transfer all the money to his accounts and call it a day. She was willing to wait years for him to have a nice life together. Nightmare, Molly exclaimed. And how did you meet? It's all rather trivial. He came to me to apply for a job. Excellent education, work experience. It all played in his favor. Alex was a quick learner, absorbed information on the fly, and he always succeeded. His persistence, diligence, and desire to achieve his goals. Honestly, as an employer, I was delighted. Initially, I paid attention to him as an employee. There are very few of those, though. Over time, we became friends. The relationship grew into a buddy relationship, and after a couple of years, he offered me to be his wife. Since I knew only the best side, I did not even think twice. I had many men who gave me signs of attention, but looking at them, I always wondered what was wrong with them. But Alex, I thought he was a man without flaws. You could say he was perfect. They say love is blind for a reason. So what did you do when you found out he was cheating? Did you break up? Of course, I kicked him out the door the same day. I can't believe you couldn't like anyone after Alex. I smiled at him. No, that's not it. After the breakup, I realized I was pregnant, Kelly admitted. I'm not. I found out the day of the breakup. I rushed home early to make my lover happy. I wanted to surprise him, but the surprise came in the form of his mistress. Kelly told so emotionally that there was a feeling that she was still amazed by the impudence of her former fiancé. It's a common story. What? It just seems like it couldn't happen to you from the outside. I recognized the scoundrel right away. The woman smiled sadly, and in the end I was divorced like a 15-year-old fool. And the children asked about the fact that he was born with him. Of course, in time a beautiful boy was born, which I named Mike. And where is he now? Studying, or rather, interning in America. In fact, he should be home soon. Kelly, you are amazing, Molly said with admiration. You are so strong, you started your own business. You raised your son on your own feet. What kind of education did you give him? It's unbelievable. He is my motivation, nodded the woman in confirmation of Molly's words. You know, I've always felt guilty about him growing up without a father. And in this way, I guess, I tried to compensate for that fact. If it's clothes, shoes, it's name brand. Vacations abroad. European education. That's how I worked day and night, just so my boy wouldn't need anything. He must love you very much if you've done so much for him. But she never got an answer to her question at home. Kelly immediately changed the topic of conversation, suddenly remembering that she had a meeting with business partners soon, and the housekeeper returned to her duties. It had been several months since the townsfolk and the girl had settled down at home. It was very surprising that, despite the friendliness of her mistress, she had not spoken a word more about her son during this time. And once Molly entered the house and found her mistress in high spirits, she was very enthusiastic. Are you celebrating something, Kelly? Curious, and the girl. From the doorstep, I could see your eyes shining. It's for a reason. Mike is coming in a week, the woman happily announced. My Mike. Home with my sister on the weekends. Working hard at Kelly's house. The landlady had asked to redecorate the rooms several times, especially carefully the one Mike would be staying in. By evening the height of 6. The end of Molly pronounced Kelly. All the rooms are already shining. Would you stop chewing on them for us? After rigorously inspecting every corner, she nodded in agreement. "Well done, girl, you've done a good job. It's perfectly clean," she smiled, and after a little silence, she added, "Mike just hates it when the house is dusty. That's just the way he is." Cindy and I were already on the doorstep getting ready to go to our place. Kelly told her, "Tomorrow's your day off, you don't have to come. I want to be alone with Mike. I haven't seen him in so long. I have so much to tell him." When Molly heard about the upcoming day off, she held back her excitement as best she could. The next day, having finished her studies, she hurried to the kindergarten to pick up Olia early. From the morning, it was pouring cold rain, which stopped in the afternoon for the wind, was so strong and cold that it checked to the bones. Then I stood at the bus stop waiting for the bus. When on the opposite side a posh automobile caught her attention. A young man got out of it, and as if nothing happened, headed to a flower shop, and from there he already came out with a gorgeous bouquet of flowers. How lucky is someone? Molly thought. I've never been given even one flower, and here is such a bouquet. I wonder if it's for his wife. She couldn't quite figure out what it was about this guy that had her hooked. But she noted his confidence, which was felt in his gait, in his posture, in his appearance, which attracted the eye. While she was pondering, the guy got back in the car and sped off. She looked after the car with some regret, but suddenly saw that he had turned around and was already driving on her side. Passing the girl at a decent speed, he swept her upside down with dirty water from a puddle. The car sped away, and Molly almost cried with resentment and frustration. She tried her best to clean herself up, which she gave with difficulty. That pleasant impression, which was created when she just saw the guy in a flash, vanished. The next day she went to work. Kelly was in no hurry, which was very unlike her, and Molly was surprised. The woman was leisurely drinking flavored coffee, sitting on the sofa in the living room, saying hello to the hostess. The girl asked, "Good morning, Kelly. Why are you alone? Where is your son?" "Sleeping. The second floor today do not clean, just dust the first floor and wash the dishes that were left after last night's dinner. And basically, you're done for the day." Molly nodded in agreement and headed for the kitchen. But how surprised she was when, passing through the dining room, she saw the very bouquet on the table in the vase. As the girl was getting the dishes, the landlady's son woke up and came downstairs. Turning off the water, Molly involuntarily heard part of their conversation with his mother. "Mom, I don't need advice. I will live my life the way I decide." The young man himself spoke, not in a very pleasant tone of voice. Molly found it even a little boorish. "And I'll decide who and when to socialize. I am your mother, and I believe that I can tell you my point of view." Kelly objected sternly. "Consider it what you want, but you shouldn't do it." The son snapped at her and headed toward the kitchen. When he saw Molly, he stood at the door. "And now we were sure that it was that boor with the bouquet, who yesterday splashed her. And who else are you?" he asked, and his tone was not friendly. Molly answered the girl modestly, "I'm your mom's assistant." And clearly, it seemed to me that in his voice she distinguished notes of squeamishness. Opening the refrigerator, I looked around at the contents. He asked, "You can make an omelette?" But of course, only to Jana. She wanted to add that cooking is not part of her duties, but he did not let her finish. "Great to cook the procession," he said. "I don't have much time." Molly didn't want to ruin her relationship with the landlady's son on the first day. So she silently took eggs and milk out of the refrigerator. She often cooked it for the field and for herself. That's why her amulet turned out no worse than in the restaurant. Deliciously praised Mike, flying away breakfast. I'm pleasantly surprised. Thank you, Molly. She couldn't deny that his praise flattered her. When Kelly entered the dining room, she was already packed. "I see you don't need to be introduced to each other." She smiled. "Thanks for feeding Mike. Finish dusting the living room, and I'll leave you alone for the day." After work at home, I decided to walk to the institute, thinking about what was wrong in the relationship between mother and son. Something did not add up, but the girl couldn't figure out what it was. Of course, we must admit that the guy was handsome, but something in his behavior and manner of conversation repulsed like attentive fought his mother a bouquet on arrival. And suddenly that rude tone during the morning conversation. Molly remembered well how Kelly had looked forward to it. how she had prepared herself. And now they were acting like two complete strangers. Well, it didn't feel like love between them. And the girl was uneasy. What kind of cat had gotten between them? After all, they are, in fact, the closest people to each other. Let's go under the visa. A familiar voice suddenly interrupted her thoughts, and Molly shuddered. She turned her head and saw Mike. He was sitting behind the wheel of the car and smiling nonchalantly. Molly immediately noted to herself that she had seen such a white smile only in movies with Hollywood actors. While she pondered her answer, the young man asked her again, "So do you need a ride? You're going far." "No, thanks. I'm almost there." "No need," she replied. "Well, as you know, perhaps." The guy shrugged and, adding speed, immediately disappeared around the corner. So we continued to work as housekeepers. And every morning, she noted to herself that Mike was always still asleep at that time. Kelly once told her that Mike came back every night in the morning, and she was very worried about him getting involved in some murky story. Molly noticed that after Mike returned, Kelly became quiet and withdrawn, constantly thinking about something, and the girl could not understand the reasons for such a change in the woman's behavior. If she waited for him with such impatience, then she should flutter, laugh, rejoice in life. And here everything was exactly the opposite. But she was not going to ask the lady of the house. She decided that if she wanted to share, she'd tell her. Every day she silently did everything around the house and went to the institute. One day she came home to work, but Kelly wasn't home. When she finished cleaning, she started to go home, but Mike stopped her. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Home. Clean my room, if you don't mind." While she cleaned up the second floor, Mike watched her closely. It made the girl feel uncomfortable. "Am I doing something wrong?" she clarified. "No, everything's just fine. I like to watch people work. Have you ever tried working?" Mike grinned and replied defiantly. And then he added, I guess he wanted to show her where she belonged. "What can I take from you?" "Housekeepers, manners." "I see you have no training at all. You haven't finished etiquette school either." Molly wouldn't give up. "With your permission, I'll finish cleaning up and go home." Letting. You've got to earn your money." Arrogantly, the guy said and left the room. When she finished cleaning, she went down to the living room and saw Mike lying on the couch. Seeing her, he immediately jumped up. "You cleaned up so quickly. I hope thoroughly." "Well, check it out. You won't like me." Smirking, he went upstairs, and after a couple minutes he shouted, "Okay, that'll do for the first time," replied Molly nicely and walked towards the exit. "I just don't get it. Why did your mom take you in?" He shouted after her. "You're always in a hurry. For example, if I needed you in the evening, what am I supposed to do?" "Your mom, I'm completely satisfied." The girl's not confused. "Maybe you should hire your own assistant. You talk too much for a maid." In the voice of the guy, clearly audible irritation. "That's no way for a maid to behave." "Well then, when you're looking for a maid, prefer a deaf mute. Then she won't hear your rudeness and won't be able to be rude back to you." And the girl left the house. All evening, Mike walked around angry. No one had ever taken such a tone with him, much less the housekeeper. Who was she anyway? A miserable dumpster diver. It really hurt the young man. And before going to bed, he caught himself thinking that it holds and courage is not inherent in everyone. She, of course, well done, did not ask. The next day, when she came to work, she found Mike already awake. The guy was rummaging through the fridge, looking for something to eat again. And Kelly, sipping coffee, was giving her son advice. "What's good to eat? What's the best way to start the day? Or maybe she's cooking me something." Mike nodded toward Molly. The girl glanced at the boy, then looked at the hostess, intercepting her utter bewilderment. Kelly's gaze pronounced, "Molly, be so kind. Cook something for my son, and I'll recalculate your salary at the end of the month." The girl silently put on her apron and started cooking. At that time, Kelly, having said goodbye, went to work, and cooking Mike cheesecakes, she proceeded to cleaning. When the girl lost the dust in the office and felt on her back, turning around, she met her eyes with Mike, who was intently watching all her movements. "Did you want something?" she asked. "Yes. To thank you for the delicious breakfast. I'm glad you enjoyed it." She wanted to get back to work, but the guy wouldn't move. That's not all. That's not all. No. I was thinking, you make me breakfast. I'd like to buy you lunch in return. That's unnecessary. I go to the institute after work and have lunch there. Yes, that's understandable. Where'd you get the money for a restaurant? In case you didn't realize, I'm inviting you, so I'm paying. Let's go and at least have a decent meal. The girl laughed in a surprisingly nervous way. You seem grateful, but you're still insulting me. I don't need your restaurant. I trust the Institute's canteen much more. Come on, don't take it to heart. Mike tried to reconcile. I just do not understand why you stubbornly difficult to accept my invitation. I see rejection. You're not used to it. But I'm not. Others are overjoyed. If I'm offering to spend time together, well, then you should invite them. I have enough to do with you in the confines of this house, Molly retorted. And I know my place. A maid is still a maid. I think you should dine with those of your own status. Okay, dinner, if you are also in the institute, did not bother the guy. We can go to the cafeteria or the canteen. I'm not picky, he said and grinned. True, I haven't tasted their food, but I mean the canteen. But maybe I'll only go there later. I doubt it, Molly replied. Everyone should have lunch and dinner where they are used to at a restaurant. At home, a cutlet and pasta will be enough for me. I see, Mike said grudgingly. But if he changes his mind, let me know. Working at Kelly's house was becoming more and more morally difficult. It seemed to Molly that Mike was following her around, controlling her every move, every step. She didn't want to complain to the landlady. It wasn't her habit. It was, and she'd be even more upset. And Mike did his best. Constantly criticized her work, additionally loaded her with new duties, and constantly called for a date. Molly couldn't figure out what he was trying to do. Whether he was mocking or wants to attract her attention to his own person. But still, she was uncomfortable in his presence. And avoiding him was impossible. In a hurry again, he intercepted her at the doorstep when Molly was about to go home. Why isn't my room clean? But you were asleep. I decided not to wake you up, answered the girl. I just have to go to the institute. I can come back tomorrow after school and clean up. Yes, be kind. The next day after the institute, she went to work. Kelly wasn't home, but Mike was happy to see her. I'd given up hope. You thought you'd forgotten about me. I let his barbs slide. She changed quickly and went up to the second floor. When she entered his room, the girl's surprise was unrivaled. Perfect cleanliness, everything sparkled. Things were lying in their places. Molly turned to him and asked who cleaned everything new. From your point of view, I'm not capable of it, he answered with a question to a question. No, that's not what I meant, Molly remarked. Why did you call me then? Thank God, the institute isn't far away. Well, I couldn't think of any other reason to invite you to dinner, Mike explained. Dinner? Not hiding annoyance, the girl interrogated. I have a child waiting for me in the garden. I don't have time to have dinner with you. While the stunned guy was digesting what he had heard, Molly quickly went downstairs and, after changing clothes, headed for the exit. But he caught up with her at the threshold. So why are you breaking everything if there's a baby? I thought, and with these words he sharply grabbed her hand and pulled her to him. Molly didn't even have time to realize how everything happened when Mike pressed her against the wall and began to cover her with kisses. The girl resisted as hard as she could, but it was useless. With one hand, the guy held her arms. The other was already getting under her skirt. Let go, she demanded. I'll tell Kelly, and I'll tell her that you hit on me. Mike replied with a sneer in his voice. I think she will believe her son more than some call him whiskey. Let go, I said. Trying to break free, she shouted. There aren't enough girls around. Why me? But her resistance further agitated the young man. His kisses became more and more demanding, and his hands roamed all over her body. In one motion, he plopped her on the couch and began to stretch the buttons on her blouse. Not interesting. They're, too accessible, he admitted in a burst of passion. And you're not. Yes, here, and let me go already, Molly pleaded. I don't want to be like this. But suddenly, hearing behind his back the threatening voice of his mother, the guy jumped up like scalded. What's going on here? Anna asked angrily. Mike, tussling his disheveled hair, stammering with excitement, said, "Aya, I didn't hear you come in." "I can see that myself," Kelly parried. "What are you doing here again?" Molly slowly got up from the couch. Burning with shame, she couldn't look into her mistress's eyes. She kept averting her gaze, trying to tidy up her clothes. "I'm sorry," Kelly, the girl mumbled faintly. She tried to explain the situation, but Mike interrupted her. "Moms of adults don't have to explain anything to anyone," he said. "Yeah, you're right. But there has to be mutual consent in a relationship like that. As far as I know, and I didn't see that consent in Molly's behavior." "Well, maybe you weren't looking hard enough," snapped the guy. "No, you're right, Kelly." Molly interrupted him. "And I'm sorry, but I can't work in your house anymore. You hired me to be your housekeeper, not to please your son." "You don't have to apologize," said the landlady. "I'm the one who should apologize to you. Go home, we'll talk about this tomorrow." Molly grabbed her bag and instantly ran out of the house. She tried to erase these nightmarish events from her memory, but the scent of expensive perfume, which Mike used, haunted her for a long time only in the shower, having previously thrown things in the wash. She was able to get rid of that intrusive odor. In the morning, Kelly called Molly herself and asked her to come over. "Mike's not here," she warned. "We can talk to you in peace." Half an hour later, she was already sitting in front of Kelly. "Are you angry with Mike?" asked the woman. "You see, I don't know who put it in his head." I don't know who put it in his head, but my son thinks that everything is bought and sold. I guess that's partly my fault too. As a mom, my only desire was to give him the best. So I worked 24/7. Mike wasn't much of a caregiver. When he was a kid, of course, he always had a nanny. But when he was a teenager, it got more complicated. Then he became very independent, as it usually happens. He became friends with the wrong kids. And his first love was a girl who'd been on the police force for a long time. Mike was even an honor student up until 5th grade. And honestly, I was proud of him. And then it was like a switch. He systematically ran away from home, snapped at me, skipped school. And all my attempts to talk some sense into him came to nothing. He wouldn't hear me. So I took the desperate step of changing my place of residence. We moved across town. I believed that when he got rid of the bad influence of his friends, everything would go back to normal. But how wrong was I? He got angry, blamed me for everything. He suffered a lot for his little girl. For a few years, we lived like a powder keg. But over time, our relationship got better, and Mike got his head on straight. He graduated from high school without fear, got into college the first time, and everything seemed fine. But the relationship between us, it's still strained. He sees me as a busy mom with a business to run, and I took away his father and the girl he loved. But it's been a long time since then. I'm surprised he's grown up. Doesn't he still realize you only wanted what was best for him? Yes, his body has grown, but his soul is still that of a spoiled little boy who resents the world, who takes revenge whenever he gets the chance. I thought you said he interned abroad. Yes, Mike graduated from the institute with a red diploma. And he, of course, not without my help, was offered an internship there. He accepted, but he still doesn't know that I had a hand in it. Again, I believed that the separation would eventually bring us closer together. And I was wrong again. Yesterday, for example, I caught you. Kelly, it had nothing to do with me. I was on my way home and he caught me in the hallway. Molly made excuses. I believe you, girl, don't worry. Kelly reassured her. I was hoping he'd be interested in you and you could make something work. But I see I was wrong once again. And I think he suggested that we're not a couple at all. We have completely different ideas about life and people. Maybe you're right, Kelly agreed. But I'm asking you to stay no matter what. Don't leave my house. Such an assistant kind. Executive decent, I will not find more. There aren't many like you. After a little silence, Molly shook her head in the negative. I'm sorry, Kelly, I can't bear to see your son. I was ready for that answer. Smiling sadly, she pulled an envelope of money from the deck and handed it to the girl. This is what you earned. I thank you for your help and will wait for you again. We'll change your mind. The doors of my house are always open to you. Tom said goodbye and left this house, as she thought, forever. She knew it would be harder now. She would have to find a new job somewhere and still be able to combine it with her studies. During her time at Kelly's, she'd managed to save a small amount of money. Not much, of course, but enough to get by. And the state paid benefits. The only thing she was afraid of. This is the guardianship authorities. If they do not leave that she is again without a job, then quickly put Olia in an orphanage. Molly will take me away again. Worried sister, as they sat in the yard and on the bench. They won't. I won't let them. I'm looking for a job, and Kelly will help in case of emergency. She promised us. It's a shame you don't work for her anymore. Sad, sighed the girl. Aunt Kelly used to give me good candy. Why don't we go visit her? Cindy had so much hope in her eyes that Molly couldn't refuse her. Of course we could, but not tonight. Let's do it another time. But why another time? They heard a man's voice behind them. When the girls turned around, they saw Mike himself. He was holding a huge bouquet of roses. Toe had been squeezed inside all this time. She tried as hard as she could to put out of her mind the memories of that terrible incident and to see his person in the yard of her own house. It wasn't exactly in her plans. Who's that? Cindy asked. The guy squatted down in front of Cindy, quickly walked around the bench, and holding out his hand, he said, "Let's get acquainted. I'm Uncle Mike. What's your name?" Cindy quickly answered the girl and looked questioningly at the bouquet. "And who is this for?" "This is for your mom," smiled the young man and handed the flowers to Molly. "That's how my mom died, and then she's a sister," the kid explained. At Cindy's words, the kid became confused. "I'm sorry," he turned to Molly. "I was just thinking." "What do you want here?" Molly asked dryly, and Mike could tell from her voice that she wasn't happy to see him. "Well, I just wanted to apologize for being such a jerk. Honestly, I don't know what the hell bit me. Forgive me, and accept this bouquet as a token of reconciliation. But I think you're forgiven. But I don't want your flowers," Molly said and started to go home. Molly, "All right, you don't have to take the flowers. But please come back to our house to work. This is out of the question. I'm prepared to guarantee you my good behavior. I won't lay a finger on you. I'm afraid you have no idea what decency is." "Yes, everyone makes mistakes, and I'm no exception," Mike tried to justify himself. "And everyone is entitled to forgiveness." "I thought I said you were forgiven," the girl reminded him. "But that doesn't mean I'm coming back to work for you. How can I make you change your mind?" "I don't understand your insistence. I don't think it's that hard to find a replacement for me. And there's a chance they'll even agree to your terms." Mike could barely keep from turning around and walking away. The last thing he ever liked to do in his life was talk someone down. "Frankly, I don't care," he said. "Who's gonna work for us?" "But Mom, she wants you." "I can't listen to her complaints anymore. I don't know why she's got it in for me." "Because my Molly is the best Molly in the world," Cindy said, catching on to her sister. The boy, smiling, looked at the girl and again turned to the former assistant of the mother. "But you did consider my offer," he said. "And we, by the way, are ready to increase your salary." Then he put the flowers on the bench and walked quickly to the car. A few minutes later, his car was out of sight, and Molly and Cindy watched him for a long time. "I didn't like him very much," Cindy said. "You don't work there anymore because of him." "Yes," Molly nodded. "And to be honest, I didn't like him right away either." From that moment on, the sisters never discussed the matter again. But Mike decided not to give up, and after a couple of days he stood near the institute and waited for Molly. "Are you following me?" She sounded annoyed. "And maybe you'll stop being me," the young man remarked. "I think that would make it easier for you and me to communicate." "What's your question?" Molly said again. "I came to see what you're thinking. About the job we don't have." "That's sad. Mom, it's very difficult right now." He was silent, as if waiting for her reaction. But when he didn't, I'm going to continue. "I just figured if you came back, it would be easier for her to get back on her feet." "What are you talking about?" Tom didn't get it. I didn't. Mom tripped coming down the porch and fell. Ended up with a broken leg. And now she's home all the time, lecturing me from morning till night about what a bad person I am. "So why didn't you say something before?" She got excited. You in the car and me. Yeah, Mike smirked. And you get in my car. Are you okay with that? But if you let me, Molly clarified and followed him. Mike started the car and stepped on the gas. The car took off like a rocket, and Molly was breathless from such a start. Don't worry, I'll get you there safely, he assured her. I want to believe it. Half an hour later, the car pulled up in front of Kelly's house. Mike opened the door and shouted at the top of his voice, Mom, look who I just delivered. Behind him, the house appeared in the doorway. She immediately noticed that her former employer was sitting on the couch with her legs stretched out. Kelly was unspeakably pleased with the girl. What a surprise! She exclaimed. A very pleasant surprise. I knew you'd think and come back. Come. Why are you standing on the doorstep like you don't belong here? Kelly was genuinely excited to see Molly. The woman couldn't figure out where to seat her guest or what to serve her. All right, are you guys talking? Said Mike, rising to his feet. When you're ready to go home, say, he turned to Molly. I'll drive you. You don't have to. She immediately refused to leave the house. I know my way home just fine. Yes, as you wish, Kelly, and then we drank tea and chatted like good old pals. Kelly asked about school and future plans. Asked about Cindy. Reminded me of how she tripped on the stairs the week before. But most of all, she talked about Mike. I think Mike's grown up a lot, she said. You know how he's changed. Not rude. More reserved, patient. He does everything for me. What's the best part? He's working now. But he should have grown up a long time ago. You're right, Kelly agrees. But you know what I know for sure? It's all you're doing. What makes you think that? I was surprised. I think you're wrong. After all, I haven't been in your house for almost 6 months. Just since you left, he's been acting completely different. I think he's in love with you. Kelly, you're exaggerating. In your son's eyes, I'm just a dump. People like him don't want to hang out with us. But to be perfectly honest, I don't like him very much. You watch, Kelly smiled. Deep down, I guess just really deep down. He's not so bad. You know what a great kid he was. If only he hadn't gotten involved with those scumbags back then. Kelly interrupted her. Molly, you're just like any other mother. You love your son madly, and therefore you try to find only good in him. But Mike is not a boy for a long time, and he should realize that he is responsible for what he does. Totally agree with you. Molly, I totally agree. But everyone makes mistakes. Let him prove himself. I see the way he looks at you. You are different from his girlfriends, mercantile, they're capricious dolls, who are used to only have fun and idle. You're different. You remind me of me when I was young. That's probably why I like you so much. I am certainly pleased to hear you say that, Molly smiled. But there's no need to set us up together. We're not a couple. I don't think we both want that. Suddenly, Mike entered the living room. Looking at his watch, he asked Molly, Not for Cindy. The girl jumped up as Alina was already there. God, I've been talking to you, she admitted. Kelly, correct me quickly. And if you don't mind, I'll drop by again. And maybe you'll work for me again. Well, at least temporarily. Kelly asked, just until I get better. Molly was confused. It wasn't in her plans to see Mike every day, but she couldn't leave Kelly in that position either. Okay, I'll go to work tomorrow, she assured her and walked toward the exit. Let me give you a ride, Mike asked. I won't let you down on the way. I promise, he smiled. Don't push it, Kelly joined in. You won't make the bus. The daycare center will be closed. All right. The girl exhaled and followed Mike all the way. Molly and Mike were silent. Parked near the daycare center, he suddenly inquired, One thing I don't understand is why you're carrying all this stuff all by yourself. I mean, you can barely make ends meet, and then there's your sister. What do you think I should have done? Molly asked. Well, I don't know. There are different options. The orphanage started listing. He started twiddling his thumbs. I'm pretty sure that if you were in my shoes, you'd do exactly that, she replied. But I love Cindy very much. I don't think you can understand me. Molly was about to get out of the car, but he grabbed her arm. Why do you always make me look like a monster? If memory serves, I apologized for what I did. I just meant that it's hard to raise a child alone, especially at your age. Yes, Molly agreed. I am young. But what does that change? Cindy's my sister. Who else is she gonna count on? I'll never leave her. That pleases with the usual smirk, Mike said. Now you're going to kill your youth, and she'll grow up and say she didn't ask you to do it at all. You don't judge people by themselves, Molly countered. I'm not doing this because I expect some kind of gratitude. For the rest of my life, I just don't know any other way. Again, you wouldn't understand. She left the car and walked to the daycare center. And Mike watched her for a long time until the girl came around the corner. Molly's words were unpleasant to him. He did not consider himself an ungrateful, dishonorable person. But there was some truth in her words. You are in the gas pedal, and he tore from the place and quickly disappeared. All the rest of the evening, Molly's words did not come out of his head. He analyzed his life up to that point, considering it normal. Mike considered himself far from being a stupid, educated, well-mannered man. Women liked him, and his friends always considered his opinion and asked for advice. Mike is used to always in front of him or hanging. And here some cesspit who knows nothing about him is constantly putting him in his place. On the one hand, he liked her, but on the other hand, she annoyed him a lot by the fact that she constantly expressed her opinion about him. Sometimes it seemed to Mike that the mother's assistant was taking too much on herself. And when I came home, I noticed that my mother was still sitting in the same place. Mom, can I help you with something? He asked. Kelly flinched in surprise. No, thank you, she said. You called me Mom for the first time in a long time. I'm so used to hearing you say Mom or Mother. Something's wrong. No, Mike shrugged. I've been thinking about it, and I realized it's the only person I have in this world. The woman's voice instantly filled with tears. But Mike pretended not to notice it and went to his room. The next day, Molly, as promised, Kelly came to see her. Mike wasn't home, but his mother was all about him. I still think it has a very beneficial effect on Mike. He has become a completely different person, sharing a hostess with a helper. Kelly, you are exaggerating again, said the girl. I don't take credit for it. It's just that people change, and your son is no exception. Most likely, he has finally realized that you are the closest person to him. Having taken the highway and having said goodbye to the landlady, Molly headed for the institute. And when classes were over, a surprise was waiting for her. Getting out as she was walking to the bus stop, Mike stopped near her. He got out of the car. In his hands was a small, but very beautiful bouquet of flowers. Hi, how are you? He said and held out the bouquet to Molly. Molly was confused. She still didn't trust him. She thought that if a person changed so much in a short period of time, it didn't bode well. You didn't have to, she said, glancing at the flowers. Why are you here? Well, first of all, the bouquet is a token of appreciation for Mom. I'm glad you're helping her get better. And secondly, I wanted to do something nice for you too. You're welcome. I'm not doing it for anything. I'm just doing it out of the goodness of my heart, you know. You should give the flowers to your mother. Why don't you stop lecturing me? Mike looked at the girl reproachfully. Of course I will. And you promise you won't follow me around the institute with flowers anymore? She said. All I need is gossip among my classmates. What's wrong with a girl meeting her boyfriend? He asked. You're not my boyfriend. Molly reminded him. Okay, fine. I swear I won't embarrass you again. But that's on the condition that you accept the bouquet. Molly sighed and took the flowers. Let me give you a ride to the daycare center. Don't take the bus. It's safer. I assure you that I will drive extremely carefully and slowly to deliver it safely. Okay, Molly gave up. But this is the last time. She walked to Mike's car, to her immense surprise. He was overly gallant and considerate, overtaking her slightly. The guy opened the car door in front of her and graciously offered her his hand. For a moment, it even seemed to her that there was a completely different person next to her. On the one hand, she liked this change, but on the other hand, she did not realize how quite recently an arrogant, insolent snob, as if by magic, turned into a well-mannered, intelligent, pleasant, in all respects a man. Something about the situation was wrong, and that something was scaring her. What are you thinking about? Mike asked, noticing that his passenger was staring out the window with an absent look. Yes. I'm thinking, how can a person change in such a short time? What can affect him so much? Answered the question. You're talking about me now. Yeah, I'm sure you'll do something. And that's what worries me. And if you're wrong? Unnatural. I acted out before because I'm used to it, he admitted. Women like confident, persistent, driven men. Don't confuse confident with assertive, Molly corrected him. Assertive but not cocky, determined but not pushy. So according to you, I'm pushy and assertive, Mike concluded. Of course you are. Molly's answer upset him. He couldn't get used to her honesty and rightness, and at the same time it turned him on. No woman had so far stirred his mind, so much so that her behavior aroused in him mixed feelings. On the one hand, he was magnetically attracted to her, and on the other, he wanted to punish her for her criminality and intransigence. Here we are, he announced, stopping outside the kindergarten. I'll wait for you here. No need. It's a short walk from here to our house. Cindy and I are going for a walk. I don't want to seem intrusive. With the conversation in mind, the man warned me. But can I still keep you company? Then she shrugged her shoulders and headed toward the kindergarten. Her sister ran out to meet her. Noticing Mike behind her, she asked in her ear, What is he doing here? The ladies met by chance, Molly explained, still whispering, and he offered me a ride. And the flowers too, he accidentally gave. The girl asked and then added, I don't like him anyway. Even with flowers. Seeing the sisters to the entrance, Mike suddenly suggested, How about a weekend walk in the park? Go to the zoo together. No, Cindy replied firmly. We have other plans. At home, she was used to her little sister being defeated beyond her years. And Mike was discouraged by the little girl's answer, but quickly gathering his thoughts, he asked, Do you have any dolls? Cindy answered a lot, and they have their own doll house. After a short pause, the little girl said, No, they live in my and Tamara's house. But everyone should have their own house. Mike insisted. Do you want us to buy a house for your dolls? The pause lengthened. Cindy could feel the thought process going on in her head. Like any girl, she wanted a dollhouse, but she still didn't trust Mike. Realizing the reason for the silence, the man turned to Molly. Do you mind if I give your sister a gift as a token of reconciliation? I don't think it's right. Let's skip the expensive gifts. But I'm about to get my first paycheck, the man informed her. I'd like to spend it on something nice. Molly was about to reply, but Mike beat her to it by adding, I promise Mom won't be left out. Still, it's unnecessary. The girl insisted. Thank you for the ride, she said, and taking her sister by the hand, disappeared into the entryway. On the morning of the day off, the girls were in no hurry. There were no special plans. Therefore, Cindy did not yet live in bed. Then went to take a shower. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Moore went quietly to the door and asked who it was. It's me, Mike. There was a voice at the door. When she opened the door, she opened her little mouth in surprise. In the hands of a man held a huge box. Crossing the threshold, he put it on the floor and said, Cindy, this is for you. The girl shifted her gaze from the giver to the gift with disbelief. She guessed what was inside, but did not dare to open it without her sister's permission. Come on, Mike urged her. I promised you a doll's house. But I'm not going to carry that weight back. The last argument was more reasonable, and she began to remove the package. The truth is, we toweled ourselves in and came out of the bathroom. She didn't expect to see Mike here, so she hid behind the door again for a few seconds out of surprise. This time was enough for the man to see the black figure of the housekeeper. Smooth legs, graceful arms, straight posture, thin waist, narrow shoulders. It was as if everything had been accurately done by a talented craftsman. In this form, the house stirred his imagination even more. Mentally, he was already imagining her in his arms. Never in his life had he wanted a woman so badly. Molly came out a minute later in a robe she had to pull out of the laundry basket. Even in her crumpled homemade clothes, she looked very attractive and desirable. I told you not to open the door to strangers, she rebuked her sister. But he's not a stranger. What the hell is this? The older sister asked sternly, looking at the toy. Now my dolls will have their own home. The girl smiled. This is too expensive gift. We cannot accept it. But Cindy, enthusiastically toys, did not even react to her sister's words. "But I will not carry it back," replied Mike. "Especially without packaging, it won't be accepted. Look how excited she is. Can you really take such a toy from your sister?" "Then I'll give you the money in my paycheck." "I won't take money from you," the young man replied. "But if you have extra money, you can take me to the movies." "Okay, but first we need breakfast." While Molly cooked, the academician Mike helped Cindy to restore the doll's house. From the outside, it looked like a tight-knit family. Despite her distrust of the landlady's son, she watched her younger sister and the guests play with amusement. At some point, it seemed to her that he was really a kind and decent man. And the incident of molestation in the living room is only a misunderstanding, in which Mike has long since repented. The incomparable Aladdin praised the guest of the hostess. "Have you tasted the cakes she bakes at home?" With pride in her voice, Cindy added, "Cindy." Adults should be addressed as Cindy. Molly corrected her. "Uncle Mike himself asked me to say you to him." When she looked questioningly at Mike, he answered, as if nothing had happened, "Why the ceremony?" "I think it's easier to communicate as it is." After breakfast, Molly and Cindy went to the biggest mall in town. There were all movie theaters, cafes, a restaurant, a skating rink, a petting zoo, a bowling alley, karaoke, and lots of stores. Once there, it was hard to get out of there. On weekends, this place was more like an anthill. It was as if all the townspeople gathered here. The sisters rarely came here. So this time, Cindy decided to go around to everything she could. They spent the whole day in the mall, and in the evening they returned home tired, but very satisfied. Cindy fell asleep in the car, so Mike volunteered to carry her to bed. After putting the baby to bed, she offered her guest tea out of politeness. "I'd be more than happy to spend a few more minutes with you," the man admitted, dropping her off at the table. The tea party dragged on. Mike did not want to say goodbye to the hostess, and the one who saw him, on the other hand, changed her initial opinion. She became convinced that Mike could be a caring, attentive, kind, and understanding person. Such, she liked him more and more. She caught herself thinking that she no longer felt any aversion to him. Among other things, Mike turned out to be an interesting conversationalist. "It's late," Molly said, glancing at her watch. "I'm sorry, sat up Mappy affairs," Mike getting up from his seat. "Time with you flies imperceptibly. Maybe we can go for a walk together again sometime." "Maybe." Mike stood on the doorstep and looked at Molly. He wanted madly to kiss her, but he was afraid of spoiling the only relationship he had with her, shifting from foot to foot like a schoolboy. Still, he dared to ask, "Can I kiss you?" Instantly the cheeks flushed. The girl's blush came over them. She wanted to say no, her tongue did not obey her. A second pause and Molly felt Mike's moist lips on hers. And without wanting to, she reached for them. She ran her hands along his neck. Mike put his arms around her waist and pulled her to him. This kiss, filled with tenderness and affection, was not like that first kiss. Molly felt herself starting to lose control of the situation. But suddenly he pulled her away from him just as gently and said, "See you soon." Kelly was quickly on the mend. Molly came to her house every day and cleaned her house. Besides that, she also had to cook meals. It was good that the vacations had started and the housekeeper had a lot of free time. The tape became a frequent guest in the house of Kelly, who was happy to spend time with her while she was doing things at home. Mike rushed home every day after work to spend time with Molly. And Kelly noticed her son's rapprochement with the housekeeper. She couldn't hide her joy about it. "I think the Sacks are seriously in love with you. She once shared her hunches with you. You see, he's completely different now. It's true what they say, love works wonders." Molly only smiled and lowered her eyes in embarrassment. She, too, saw these changes that made her look at the man with different eyes. She felt herself falling more and more in love with him every day. Alone with Mike, her heart was beating very hard. It was like it was trying to jump out, and only a little worm in her head kept her mind at rest. It's like it's drilling into the same place, not letting her relax and forget. Cindy, despite her young age, had a very mature way of thinking. "Uncle Mike may be a good man, but I don't think he's for you," she said to her sister when they were alone together. "You're not the same, but you seem to like him too." I was surprised by that. "Yes," the girl nodded. "But he's not real, too perfect." That's not how it works. When they took off the cast, she was offered to go to the local sanatorium for rehabilitation. Not thinking long, the woman agreed, taking a promise to Molly that there will be a housekeeping in the house during her absence. "And maybe Cindy's daughter will come with me." Suddenly the girl's mistress suggested, "It would be nice to have a change of scenery. And I won't be bored." Cindy gladly agreed to Aunt Kelly's proposal. And 2 days later, they left together for the sanatorium. That same evening, Mike arranged a romantic candlelight dinner for Molly. Of course, Molly cooked the dinner, but while she was busy in the kitchen, he set the table in the living room, invited the lights on, lit candles, and turned on some light, pleasant music. What a surprise, she marveled, like the best houses in Paris. But why should we be so good in Paris too? "Yes," I remarked defiantly, pushing back my chair. The young man invited him to the table. Playing along, the girl, lifting her skirt slightly, walked solemnly to the chair and sat down. Mike unsealed a bottle of red wine and filled the glasses. "I propose a toast to us," he said. Taking a sip, Molly put the glass back down. But Mike said toast again and again. Even a dense dinner did not rid the girl, not accustomed to alcoholic beverages, from a slight dizziness. "Shall we dance?" Mike suggested, and taking Molly by the hand, led her to the center of the living room. Under the quiet, calm sounds of music, the young people slowly twirled in a dance. Despite her outward calm, Molly's insides were trembling. Every touch of the man excited her, and her heart periodically made attempts to jump out of her chest. The wine and the ever-present scent of Mike's cologne combined. And at some point, Molly's legs became spot-heavy. She rested her head on her beau's shoulder and felt his muscles tense. In the same instant, he picked her up in his arms and carried her to his room. "What are you doing?" "Don't say anything," Mike asked in a whisper. Walking up to the room, he placed her on the bed and lay down next to her. Feeling the inner resistance, the girl, he did not let her come to her senses. "And I want you to be mine," he whispered and kissed her. There was silence in the room. Molly's consciousness suddenly became clear. She slowly pulled the blanket over her, covering herself shamefully. Mike lay with his eyes closed and said nothing. Finally, after a few minutes, he got up and headed for the bathroom. There, I didn't know what she should do. On the one hand, she realized that nothing supernatural had happened between them. But on the other hand, she was ashamed of her weakness. While she was pondering, Mike took a shower and returned to her. To the match, the author toweled off the towel. Seeing the girl's embarrassment, he lay down next to her and asked, "How are you feeling?" "Normal," she replied, barely audible. "To be honest, I was surprised." "You really didn't have anyone before me?" Mike asked, as if still in doubt. "I thought there were no more of them left these days." Molly didn't answer, but pulled the blanket tighter around her. "I'll go get some water," he informed her. "I'll get you some." She nodded. And after waiting for him to leave the room, she headed for the bathroom. Standing under the shower, she could still feel the touch on her body. Mike's kisses brought recent events to mind, and his voice sounded in her ears. The warm water gradually brought Molly to her senses. Wrapped a large terry cloth towel around herself, she came out of the bathroom and found Mike sprawled on the bed on top of the blanket, looking at her intently. He had his trademark smirk on his face. It made her feel a little uncomfortable, but she felt better the next second. Mike smiled and patted the empty seat on the bed next to him. Affectionately said, "Come to me, pretty girl." Then they boldly sat down next to each other on the bed. Mike put his arm around her shoulders and kissed her to him. "Listen, you're hot in a happy tone," he remarked. "I didn't expect you to be so passionate. Would you mind doing it again sometime?" Kelly and Cindy had been at the sanitarium for 2 weeks. All this time, she called her son and the housekeeper periodically to tell her about her business and to ask about news from home. Mike went to work every day and after a short rest returned to her studies. She still did the household chores, but now often stayed at the Kelly house. Ever since Molly had gotten close to Mike, she had missed him very much. He would be late from work for a good reason, or he had a meeting with friends, or he had to visit his sick boss. Soon Kelly and Cindy returned home. The girl had a lot of impressions. She told her sister nonstop about the wonderful time she had spent with Aunt Ellie at the sanitarium. Tom was happy for her, but she could not hide her worries about the changes in her life from her hostess. "So tell me, what's going on with you and Mike?" the woman asked, left alone with the housekeeper. "Yeah, everything seems fine," Molly answered her questions. "You don't have to lie to me," Kelly asked. "I was happy to hear that you'd started a relationship with my son. But honestly, I don't see joy in your eyes." "Yeah, I'm happy," Molly said. "I just feel like Mike's been spending less time with me, you know. He's kind of cooled off, you know?" "Oh, come on, don't make it up," Kelly reassured her. "It's just that men can't devote themselves to a woman completely. It's us women who dissolve into them when you fall in love." Time passed. After Kelly and Molly returned, she no longer stayed overnight at their house. Nor did Mike insist. After walking Molly home, he would go about his business and often return well past midnight. Kelly didn't like her son's late nights out, but she didn't give him away to Molly, hoping that he would come to his senses and change. However, time passed, but nothing changed. The woman noticed how sad her housekeeper was. She felt sorry for her, so she decided to intervene. "Mike, we need to talk strictly," she said. One day, the son gathered for another meeting with friends. "Mother, let's not do this now," he asked. The word mother cut Kelly's ears. Lately, Mike had been calling her mom, and it had pleased her immensely. But what had happened today? Why mom again? "Did something happen to you?" she asked. "There's trouble at work." "No, it's all right there," the son answered in a disgruntled tone. "And I offered you many times to go into business with me," the woman reminded. "I don't want my mother to be my boss," Mike retorted. "When you're going to retire, then call me." "What's going on with you and Tamara?" she asked me directly. "What do you mean, not pretending?" "Molly, good girl, she'll make a fine wife. You're lucky she's paying attention." "That she paid attention to me with disdain," he interjected. "Yes, she should thank the universe that a man like me had come her way." At that time, the housekeeper finished cleaning and went into the living room to say goodbye to the owners. The conversation between mother and son made her stop outside the door. Never before at home had she allowed herself to eavesdrop on other people's conversations. But this one directly concerned her, so she ducked her ear to the keyhole so she could hear better and froze. I'm sure she was grateful, her mother parried. "You've been dating for a few months now. When are you going to propose to her?" "Mammoths." "About what?" "I asked a normal question when young people date. They make plans for the future." "Answer, are you thinking of marrying Molly?" "Yeah, of course not," grinned Mike. "Who am I, and who is she?" "Do you think I see my life as a dump? She's my assistant. And only because of the circumstances of life." The landlady stood up for the girl. "But you know, she's about to graduate." And that Mike didn't give up. "What does that change? She's a cowgirl. I'm attracted to other girls who are more interesting, with big, shapely breasts and empty heads." Pissed off Kelly, "At least they're not embarrassing to go out with." "Mike, to be honest, I had a better opinion of you," she admitted. "I thought you were a smart, serious, forward-thinking man. And you're still a heartbreaker." "Mother, let's not get moralistic," he asked. "I won't let you hurt Molly. The girl's been through enough in this life." "I'm not going to hurt her," the man replied. "Isn't that how it works? You meet and you break up?" Seeing that her son would not be persuaded, Kelly bitterly waved her hand and left the living room. Frustrated, she headed for the stairs and didn't even notice the housekeeper standing outside the door. Molly did not move. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. She realized that Mike had deceived her. When she returned home, she cried into her pillow all night and woke up the next morning with a firm decision to sever all ties with the family in the house she had been working on for many months. Arriving at Kelly's house and heading straight to the landlady, Mike was already gone. He was on his way to work, and the landlady, trying to hide the traces of her worries about the housekeeper, asked with a smile how Molly was doing. "How's Cindy?" Not wanting to beat around the bush, "Yes, around the bush." The girl said, "Kelly, I overheard you talking to your son yesterday. You realize I can't continue to work in your house under these circumstances." "Come on, maybe things will change," I said with hope in my voice. "Maybe Mike will come to his senses." "You can't force a favor," said the volume. "Yes, and I am unpleasant, after all, heard to communicate with him and pretend that nothing happened." "Well, I know what you mean," Kelly agreed. "You're probably right. I'm sorry about what happened." "Davidoff," Molly replied. "You don't have to apologize to me for your son. He's a grown man, and he can take responsibility for his own actions." And for several days, Molly did not work at Kelly's house. She was completely immersed in her studies to get Mike out of her head. Halienko realized something was going on with her sister. But without getting an answer to her questions, she didn't ask anymore. Kelly, feeling her guilt, did not abandon the girls. She often came to visit them at the hotel. The women did not bring up the subject of Mike, pretending that he did not exist. And coming once again to visit the sisters, Kelly said, "Molly, I have an offer for you, which you cannot refuse." Intriguing, she smiled. "I want to take you into my business," she said. "In a few months, you'll get your degree and you'll be looking for a job. So I suggest you skip this difficult stage in your life and come to me for an internship right now. But I probably won't be able to do it." Molly was nervous. "I don't know anything about your business. What am I for?" Kelly asked cheerfully. "I'll teach you everything. If you want to leave, I won't keep you from working in your specialty. And if you like it, I promise you career growth and a good salary. Agree at home for jumping," satisfied Cindy. After a little thought, Molly smiled and nodded in agreement. "I'll do my best," she promised. "Thank you so much, Kelly." The next few months flew by. All the while, Molly was writing her thesis and interning at Kelly's company. The former owner and now director was pleased with the new employee. Molly grasped everything on the fly. She quickly joined the team and earned the respect of her colleagues. Now she devoted all her free time to herself and her little sister. Molly, knowing about her natural beauty, nevertheless, following the advice of her boss, began to visit beauty salons. She watches her appearance, updated her closet, enrolled in the gym. For a diamond to become a diamond, it needs a professional guard. Kelly liked to repeat it, and Molly had learned her lesson. Young men looked back at her time and time again, making attempts to ask her out. But Molly didn't have affairs at work. She still had fresh memories of her failed relationship with Mike. The girl was not ready to jump into the maelstrom with her head again. One day, the director of the company came to work in a bad mood. Never before she did not allow herself to raise her voice at her subordinates. But on this day, her shouting was heard from the very morning. Employees did not leave their workplaces, afraid to catch her eye. Gathering her courage, Molly entered the director's office and saw that just now the woman was standing at the window and wiping her tears. "Kelly, what happened?" She ran up to her. "I can help you." The principal didn't react to her words for a while and then turned around, looked at the girl carefully and replied, "Mike is going to get married." The news was like a blow to the head. All this time she had been carefully trying to forget him. She couldn't say she still loved him, but his desire to marry someone else had hurt her ego. Molly swallowed the lump in her throat and said as calmly as possible, "It had to happen sometime. Maybe Mike would settle down now. I'd hoped until the last day that he'd come to his senses and come back to you," Kelly admitted. "I'm flattered by your words," Molly replied, "but I don't think I could forgive him, so let him be happy with his girlfriend." The principal hugged the girl and smiled with sadness in her eyes. "It's a shame my son never realized what gold he had lost. You didn't spend much time in the principal's office." Kelly wanted to share her worries about the upcoming celebration with someone, and she couldn't find a better listener than Molly. The girl least of all wanted to know the details of the preparations for Mike's marriage. But she did not dare to tell his mother about it, so she listened to her stories for hours. From Kelly's remarks, it was clear that from her daughter-in-law she was not delighted. A narcissistic painted doll reviewed her. Kelly had been born with a golden spoon in her mouth and had not understood it all her life. Her father spoiled her. He taught her that everything was bought and sold. And when he was gone, he died 3 years ago, then the no-show wife flushed all his $1 million fortune on lovers, and now no one needs it. She's determined to get her daughter a fortune. What they don't know is that Mike's broke and living off me. So why don't you tell them? Molly asked, and why Vanessa comes to our house and tells me for hours about her great love for my son. So why ruin that love? And Mike, he loves her. I don't know. Sometimes I think he's incapable of love at all. I decided not to interfere in his life, let them live as they please. Finally, it was X day. Despite Kelly's entreaties to celebrate the wedding without excessive pathos, the young people made a feast for the whole world. Of course, not without the financial support of mothers, Kelly immediately warned her son that the wedding and wedding gift will be the last of her investments in him. And the mother of the bride collected the rest of the untold riches of her dead husband and gave them to the wedding of her daughter with the condition that after marriage, she will return everything to her with more than enough. After the festivities, the newlyweds left for a wedding trip, which Kelly gave them, and she herself returned to work, to congratulations and questions from her subordinates. The director answered dryly and reluctantly. It was felt that the woman was worried about her son's future, but did not change her principles. He is a grown man, not stupid and with a good education, Molly Kelly reassured. He'll be fine. You'll laugh when you remember how you shed tears in vain. God give you a good husband. Kelly couldn't hide her admiration. He would. The girl laughed, all in good time. Mom, I want to talk to you, Mike said when he got back from a wedding trip. Let's talk, Kelly agreed. Are you in some kind of trouble? No, he laughed. He just wanted to get an inside look at your business, so to speak. Unexpected. You've always been against the boss's mother. Well, you know, things change philosophically in this world, Mike remarked. My mind has changed. Maybe you'll want to hand over your authority to me too, when you're convinced that I'm doing a good job with your enterprise. Mike and his young wife had returned from a wedding trip the day before, and from the road they went straight to their room, from which they did not leave all evening. It was not until the next morning, while Vanessa was out of bed, that Mike came out into the living room and had an unexpected conversation with his mother. Well, that's fine with me, Kelly replied. My business is going to stay anyway. That's why it's better to figure it out beforehand. When do you plan to go to work? Well, I guess I could start today. I can't promise that I'll get into the process right away, so we'll just get to know the staff first. My mother grinned and glanced at her watch and said, Then you have 15 minutes to get ready. I don't like my employees to be late. I'll wait for you in the car. While Mike searched for a clean, lined shirt, the time for packing ran out of suitcases on the run sleeping spouse. He managed at the last moment to get into the car to his mother, who had already left the place. Actually, I haven't even had breakfast, he complained. Well, didn't your wife see you off? Vanessa's asleep, and she doesn't need to go to work today. Mammoth's what? Surprised Mike. In her family, women don't work. Ours do, Kelly parried. And if she thinks I'm going to feed and clothe her for the rest of her life, she's sorely mistaken. I will. Mike interceded. For my chosen one, I will be able to provide for my woman, and then for my children. And what will your woman do? Home. A wife's duty is to keep the hearth and bear children. Kelly silently looked at her son and continued to follow the road. Soon they arrived at the factory. Mike walked in step with his mother, trying from the first minutes to establish himself in front of his subordinates as a strict boss. He had been to his parents' kingdom many times as a teenager, but then he had been here as a guest, and now he was off to take the throne. And practically nothing had changed here, the man noticed. Only there are more employees. Yes, production is expanding. Business is booming, the mother agreed. With the right management, it's a profitable business. We're here. Where? I don't understand, Mike. Your office, if memory serves, is on the top floor. I thought I'd be sitting next to you. Sitting my dear son is not gonna work, she said. If you're here to work, you're going to have to sweat. I'm used to being alone in my office. Here is your workplace. The director pointed to a vacant desk, which stood among the other desks where the employees were working. Mike looked around the large workshop and turned a puzzled look at his mother. You don't want to put me in the shop, do you? He clarified. But you yourself wanted to get acquainted with the production from the inside. She reminded him. When having mastered the technology, I will transfer you to the quality department. Mom, I'm your son. "Here you are, my employee," replied the director, turned around and went to the stairs. "If something will be unclear, ask your colleagues." Mukinoi did not argue with her, deciding to continue the conversation in the evening at home only at lunchtime. He managed to have breakfast and lunch, sitting at the table, watching the employees. Suddenly, his gaze stopped on a very elegant young woman. By her demeanor and manners, it was clear that she held a considerable position in this enterprise, mesmerized by her beauty and grace. Mike did not immediately recognize the well-groomed, blooming young woman as Molly. Of course, he had heard from his mother that she had invited her former housekeeper to join her at the company, but he had not expected to see such a change in her. There was no trace left of that wiretap. She walked with a confident stride, responding with a slight nod to the greetings of the employees. Mike, as if mesmerized, did not take his eyes off her. The episodes of their dates suddenly appeared in his memory. He remembered how he had sought her out, and having achieved, immediately lost interest. It seemed to him that he even remembered the taste and smell of the food she cooked. "Have you had your lunch yet?" He heard his mother's voice. Mike looked up and saw his mother and nodded. She put the tray of food on the table and sat down across from her son. "Have you changed your mind about working at my company?" Anna asked. Mike looked at Molly and asked, "Who works here?" "I am Molly," the woman clarified. "She's my right hand. I don't know how I used to manage without her. She runs the place when I'm away." "Wow, so some dump is the boss of this place. And the director's son is just a simple laborer. So we learned the manufacturing process from scratch and learned it fast," Kelly said. "If you try as hard as she did, you'll have your own office very soon." Mike was not happy at the prospect. He'd assumed he'd take over immediately. But he miscalculated. If it hadn't been for his wife, he would have left his mother that day. But Vanessa insisted that it was time for him to take the business into his own hands, not to depend on his parent. So the man got up and headed into the shop to his workplace. "Hello, darling." Vanessa met her husband after the first working day at the new place. "How are your progress?" "Fine. What are we having for dinner?" "I thought we were going to a restaurant to celebrate your first day as boss." "Vanessa, what restaurant? What boss? And I don't think I've ever been as tired as I am today. What were you doing?" "Working, Vanessa." "So we're not going to the restaurant," she clarified, stretching her lips. Well, the hostess asked Kelly, who had just entered the house, to set the table and headed for her room. After changing her clothes, she went down to the dining room, and when she saw the empty table, she asked, "And we are without dinner tonight, Mom?" "Vanessa suggested that we celebrate my new assignment at the restaurant," Mike said. "What's there to celebrate?" The woman was surprised. "You'll be the boss. Then I'll celebrate, but for now I don't see any reason." "I don't get it," Vanessa shot. "What are you now? If you're not the boss? And now your husband is a prominent employee in the shop," explained the mother. "A good boss. Someone who rose to his post from the bottom of the ladder." The mother-in-law's answer stunned her daughter-in-law. At first, she stood with her mouth open and remained silent, flapping her eyes, and then she grinned. "My husband is a shop worker." "Yes," Kelly confirmed. "Can you be proud of him? He accomplishes everything through hard work. I was wondering what you've been doing all day." "I went to my mom's house, and then I went to the beauty parlor with her. We just got back," Vanessa said. "I'm really tired and hungry. Why don't we go to a restaurant after all?" Mike looked at his mother, but she turned around and went into the kitchen. "I spent a lot on vacation. The paycheck's not due for a while. If we go to a restaurant now, we'll be broke by the end of the month." "What are you talking about?" With irritation in his voice, she asked. "I was getting married to one of the wealthy suitors of our city. And now you're telling me we have no money. But you know what kind of spending we've been doing for the last month, don't you? My cards aren't unlimited. So ask your mother, she won't deny her only son." "I'm not sure that's a good idea." Mike shook his head. "We're adults and we have to support ourselves. She doesn't have to support us." "Good for you," Vanessa said indignantly. "The mother-in-law makes so much money and lives with her son. When you were single, okay, someone had to take care of you. But now that you're married, you might want to think about moving." "What move? Where would she go?" Mike asked. "It's her house." Why does she need a house like this on her own? We have a family with kids, and she would be enough with an apartment. At that moment, Kelly appeared on the threshold of the living room where the newlyweds were. "Let's go to dinner," she called her son and daughter-in-law. Already sitting at the table, she warned Vika, "Only I do not think that it will be like this every day. Our family has never had a slacker from. And since you do not work, be kind to keep the house in order and cook dinner." "I'm not a housekeeper or a cook," snapped at Vanessa. "I'm not going to ruin your manicures and leathers. But we are your floors." Kelly looked questioningly at her son and then at her daughter-in-law. "What did you get married for?" she inquired. "It is the husband's duty to support his wife." "Well, what is the wife's duty?" Vika was stumped by her mother-in-law's question. She shifted her gaze from her husband to her mother-in-law and honestly tried to find the right words. Finally, the girl gathered her thoughts and answered, "A wife's duty is to bear and bring up children." "Good. And who will feed and wash them?" "That's what housekeepers are for," Vanessa reasoned. "But if you haven't noticed, we don't have a housekeeper," replied my mother-in-law. "I've been doing the housework on my own so far. I think I can make myself a bowl of soup and iron a dress. But I won't take care of my son anymore. He has a wife now. If you have a housekeeper, I won't object, but you'll have to pay for her services yourself." After dinner, Kelly washed the dishes and went to her room, leaving the newlyweds alone. "I don't think my mother likes me," Vanessa concluded. "She's always picking on me, trying to embarrass me in front of you. Don't make it up." Mike stood up for his mother. "She just wants you to do your job." "Oh, I see. I guess it wouldn't surprise me and her to be in the same house together. We should give her a hint that it's time to move out." "Why have you talked to your mom?" "It's not hard to talk to her," Mike smiled. "Just as long as you and I don't have to look for an apartment." "Long sleep, son," Kelly remarked, putting on her jacket and heading for the exit. "How are you leaving already?" Mike clarified. "You're not waiting for me. I warned you that I don't like it when employees are late, and I'm never late myself," replied the mother and disappeared behind the door. Mike, dissatisfied, went to the kitchen. The table was empty. In the refrigerator, there was nothing like a cooked breakfast. Deciding to have a snack on the way to work, he slammed the refrigerator door and went to his room. His spouse was sleeping like a baby. Mike looked in the closet and did not find a single damp shirt. "Suck it." Quietly, he called to his wife to iron the shirt. The girl only rolled over to the other side. Vic repeated louder to me, "What are you wearing to work?" My wife opened her eyes and stretched, and with a smile she replied, "Well, don't go." She stretched out her arms to her husband, and taking him in her arms, dragged him into bed. Mike did not resist. He liked it when Vanessa was gentle and affectionate with him. Failing in bed with his wife, Mike looked at his watch and realized that he was finally late for work. "Everything, of course, is great," he said. "Why all this circus with a simple worker, then a foreman, and so on? Everyone should sit in his place. I didn't go to university, so that now I can work as hard as ordinary laborers. If it weren't for these, as you say, simple laborers, you wouldn't be living in a huge house now and eating caviar sandwiches. Oh, by the way, that's the sandwich Mike's been fighting about. I'm late today because I spent a long time making breakfast and ironing my shirt. Why doesn't your wife cook and iron for you? I thought you said the husband was the breadwinner and the wife the keeper. And Vanessa doesn't feel like a mistress in our house," Mike complained. "And I get it." "Well, you can't have two women in the same kitchen." "I agree. That's why I suggest you think about moving. Maybe then your Vanessa will sooner have the quality of a hostess." Mike realized that the conversation was not going in the direction he wanted, so he decided to just leave. His mother stopped him on the doorstep. "And about work, think about it. And for today's absenteeism, usually you have wages." Only after leaving the office, Mike gave vent to his feelings. "What a mother. While I was a kid, she was at work 24 hours a day, and now she decided to take care of my upbringing. Too late for that. We'll see who comes running for help first. You're not young," he used to say to her in his heart, "and you're not taking your business with you. And when things get tough, you'll be the one to call. You're all right." A familiar voice pulled him out of his thoughts. Mike looked up and saw Molly in front of him. She was walking towards the director with a stack of folders with documents. The girl looked at him as if he were a stranger. Not a single muscle on her face trembled. He even thought she might actually not recognize him. "Molly, you look good." He perked up. "How are you?" "Thank you," the girl replied calmly. "I'm doing great. How about you?" "I thought you seemed upset." "You did." "All right," shrugging her shoulders, she continued on her way. "Oh, wait." Mike called out to her. "Why don't you meet me tonight, and we can sit and talk?" "No," firmly said about the fact that I do not meet with married men, and talk to you, and I have nothing to talk about. Without waiting for an answer from her former suitor, the girl headed for the principal's office. Mike stood and looked after her. Miniature, as if lost by the hand of a master, elegantly dressed in expensive stiletto shoes. She walked down the hallway, swaying her hips. The young man could not take his eyes off her. As if mesmerized, he watched and remembered the nights spent together with her. "Beautiful on the exhale," said an unfamiliar male voice behind him. "You can't take your eyes off her." Mike looked disdainfully at the man in the work uniform and replied yes, nothing special. And to close the subject, added, "And you go where you went married life more and more strained Mike." That's not how he pictured it. Vanessa constantly demanded money. His mother on principle did not give him a penny. Earlier, Mike's salary was quite enough for entertainment and partying. All other expenses were completely on his mother's shoulders, and now he had to support himself and his wife. And as it turned out, his paycheck wasn't enough for all that. "Mike, ever since we moved in, you've stopped making time for me. All your time is taken up. Why don't we go out tonight, like to a club or something?" "Vanessa, what club? I work from morning till night. I barely have enough money to make ends meet." "How long are you going to be your mother's apprentice?" The disgruntled wife asked. "You can't agree with your own mother." He answered with irritation in his voice. "You did not live in her house on everything ready, so we moved out. You can forget about clubs and restaurants now. It's all set." Vanessa was indignant. "Yes, your mother made it clear from the very beginning that we were superfluous. She was specifically trying to get us to move into a rented apartment. If you'd done anything around the house, none of this would have happened. So this is all my fault, huh? Well, I'm sorry. You should have told me you didn't want a wife, but a housekeeper. I've never held a rag or a frying pan since I was a kid. And you thought if I married you, I'd be a cook and a cleaner. Husband's wrong. If you can't earn a decent living for your wife, that's your problem. And you don't have to put it on your head." Having said everything she wanted, Vanessa also wanted a cute laboring woman, stretched her lips, clapped her slow eyelashes. "Well, honey, maybe you'll ask your mom for money after all." "Honey," he didn't answer. "Mike, don't you want to help me solve our problems?" "Sure, I want to, get a job." "Are you kidding me? What will my friends say?" Vanessa said fearfully. "Yeah, they'll laugh at me. And what's funny is that a man works, only losers and villains work. So according to you, my mother and I are losers, and your father, who earned $1 million fortune, was a loser or a villain." We had already stumped Vika with these examples, but she quickly figured out what to say. "My father is the exception. And you're a loser? Couldn't agree with your own mother about the most basic things. Now go at her like a peasant. I have a feeling this conversation is going nowhere good." Mike's conclusion. "Like it or not, you're going to have to learn how to run a household. I don't have a fresh shirt left. The refrigerator is empty. There's a thick layer of dust on the furniture on the floor. We can't go on like this. I totally agree with that. I don't want to live in this filth. I'm sick of eating scrambled eggs and shopping for dumplings. I'm off to my mom's. When I'm rich, call me." And she packed her things and left, slamming the door loudly. And Mike did not hold her back, deciding that without her it would be easier for him to return to his mother's house, and perhaps to persuade her to appoint him her deputy. And he hadn't miscalculated. Kelly, after listening to her son's sob stories about how his wife left him, decided to give him a second chance. She put him in charge of the business for the duration of her business trip. Kelly had been planning to open a branch in another city for several years, and now she was on her way to solve all the issues on the spot. Molly. She left to look after Mike. The girl had studied the details of production during her work, and now she understood all the nuances as well as the owner of the enterprise. Sometimes Kelly said in her heart, "I wish you were my daughter. You and I would have broken mountains together." After his mother's departure, Mike returned to her house, and on the same day broke the news to his wife. Vanessa had been living at her parents' house for a few days, but did not know how to move out. Mother brought another Alfonso lover with whom the press lived the remnants of her husband's fortune. She gradually sold off expensive furniture, her jewelry, and talked about selling cars at home. To her daughter's grudging rebuke, she answered the same thing. "You first live with your husband for as many years as I have lived, having him at work the same fortune that your father earned, and then we dispose of." Upon learning of Mike's change in life, Vanessa rushed over the same day. "We must seize the situation immediately." She taught her husband, "Now you have access to your mother's money. You can, for example, transfer a small amount from the company account to your own account, which will be enough for us for the first time, and gradually you will gain her trust and take the reins of power into your own hands. So according to you, it is so easy to withdraw money from the company's account." Mike doubted Kelly's words. "I'm sure it won't be too difficult for you," she assured me. "You're smart, educated. And who would notice a small amount of money in such a huge enterprise? And then no one will dare say anything to you. You are the son of the owner, so you are the future director." Mike didn't like his wife's idea, but her arguments were reasonable. Of course, he was entitled to his mother's money, and there might never be a better opportunity. After a little thought, the man decided to act. He realized that the old employees who had worked at the company since its founding, he did not help him. But there was one young man among the newcomers, a young man who was desperate for a reward. After a few days, Mike and his wife could afford to hire a housekeeper and even pay off the debt to Vanessa's mother. Now they could visit clubs and dine in restaurants. And Mike answered Molly's questions in a commanding voice. "Don't poke your nose where it doesn't belong. This is my mother's business, which means it's mine." "I think Kelly should know about it," the assistant said. "She does." The young man assured her, "You're just jealous. She didn't want to date me, and now they're biting their elbows. But I'm not a vindictive person, and my offer still stands. Do you want to have dinner tonight? I don't think your wife would like that." Tom said, "I don't think she's expecting me for dinner." Every day, Mike took more and more refuge in the role of the boss. He allowed himself to speak disrespectfully and in an orderly tone with his subordinates, to be late for work, or even not to come at all. He constantly needed money for his beautiful life, and now he knew where to get it. Mike and Vanessa did not deny themselves anything, but the beautiful life of the newlyweds did not last long. Kelly soon found out about the shenanigans of her son and daughter-in-law. The business trip had to be cut short, and she had to return to the city. "Mom?" Mike was surprised to see his mother on the doorstep. "What are you doing here?" "I live here dry," she replied. "Yeah, that's understandable. But you're supposed to be on a business trip." The young man still couldn't believe his eyes. "I have to be," Kelly confirmed, starting her suitcase behind her. "And you have to be at work, aren't you?" Mike glanced at his watch and remained silent. Vanessa's voice came from upstairs. "Mike, but you've got a long wait, and I'm going to die of thirst." "Vanessa's mom is here," Mike told wife. 2 minutes later, the daughter-in-law was already down the stairs to the living room. "Kelly, are you back already?" she asked in a massive voice. "We weren't expecting you so early. Maybe you mean you didn't have time to go through all my money." Anna said sternly. "I don't know what you're talking about," Vanessa parried. "Mike, day in and day out at work, I hardly see him. From today, Mike will be at your complete disposal," she answered and turned to her son. "And you don't work there anymore." Mike and Vanessa, dumbfounded by the arrival of the hostess, stood looking at each other. Kelly dragged her suitcase up to the second floor and disappeared into her room. But after a moment, she came out of her room and said, "And clear the house tonight, Mother." "Actually, this is my house too. Don't forget, I'm your own son," resented Mike. "You can't kick me out every time. The deed to the house is mine. But in fact, you are no longer my son. I will not tolerate traitors in my house." I've worked my whole life, so you wouldn't need anything. I gave you a great education. And how did you take advantage of all that? You steal from me, and then you have the nerve to tell me you're my son. Take your slacker and get out of my house. And if you dare to disobey me, I'll file a police report against you. After the scandal, Kelly closed herself in her room and, trying to distract herself from heavy thoughts, she unpacked her suitcase, took a hot bath, and went to work. Her coworkers greeted her with joy. "Kelly, sorry to have to distract you from important negotiations," said Molly at the meeting, but did not apologize. The director interrupted her. "Did you do the right thing? Just a little more, and my negotiations would have become irrelevant." At that time, the chief accountant looked into the director's office. "Come in." Betty invited Kelly too. "And you stay," she nodded to Molly. The girl remained standing in her seat. The head accountant walked over to the director's desk and put down a folder of papers. "Here is the expense report for the entire period of your absence." Kelly looked at the papers carefully and, only after studying them to the end, asked, "Who helped him?" "Thomas," Betty answered. "When I went on sick leave like you told me to, he stayed on for me. Mike Alexeyevich promised him a generous reward. Of course, all the operations were not without my knowledge and strictly from the money you left, and clearly without hiding her disappointment," said Kelly. "It's a pity that Mike decided to dispose of the opportunity to show himself as a leader. But I'd rather find out what he can do now, replacing me, than have him ruin my baby later." "Kelly, so you arranged this business trip on purpose?" Molly asked. "You knew about it before I called." "No, it was a real business trip, a very successful one," the director replied. "But I did not immediately decide to entrust my son with the management of the company. I realized that he is completely inexperienced in this business and wanted to check how he will solve the issues, with whom he will consult, and whether he will do anything at all. Advice." Betty had set aside a small amount of money for unexpected expenses. Of course, Mike didn't know anything about it. It was a test. Kelly sighed and added with bitterness in her voice, "And he didn't pass." For several days, the principal looked depressed and preoccupied. Most of the time, she was silent. Left alone with her thoughts, she often sighed at home, trying to stay close to her. She sincerely was. It was a pity. He had been a long time since they had met, and she had become a close person to the sisters. Now that the woman was alone, they supported her, for which Kelly was grateful to the girls. 10 years had passed. The relationship between mother and son could hardly be called kinship. Mike lived in a rented apartment and worked by profession in a small office. He'd been divorced from his wife for a long time. Vanessa had found a better match. They never had children. Molly had been married for several years and was raising a daughter. Cindy finished school and entered the institute. She supported the girls in everything. Over the years, they had truly become family. One day, the director called Molly into her office and said, "I've decided to hand over my brainchild to you. Only you will be able to carry on my work properly. And you're going somewhere. No, I'll be around if you need me to help you. But I'm getting restless. What about Mike?" Molly asked hesitantly, "Because he's your son." "Mike is my son by blood. Nothing more. But you and Cindy are my daughters in spirit, and you are more dear to me. I know I can rely on you, and much to my regret, I never got to be a mom to Mike." "Kelly, but everyone can make mistakes." She tried to stick up for him. "I'm sure he's regretted it many times over. If he did, he'd come and apologize. But he still feels wronged. And I no longer have any desire to prove anything to him." Soon Molly became director of the company, and a year later Kelly died. It turned out she'd been ill for a long time, but she hadn't told anyone. Mike moved into his mother's house after the funeral, but his joy was short-lived. Kelly bequeathed the house to Molly and bought her son a spacious apartment. She also opened a bank account in Mike's name from which he could withdraw a certain amount each month. What a mother! The man cursed in his heart, having learned about his parents' will to leave everything to some half of the dump, and the son must live in poverty. The housekeeper had done more for her than her own son. She heard a girlish voice from behind her. Cindy looked contemptuously at Mike and left the notary's office.